The conference room smelled like stale ambition and fresh betrayal, the kind that lingers in the air long after the words are spoken. Sarah Ellis stood there, arms crossed, her dark hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail, watching as Mark Harlan, the new IT director, leaned over the laptop with that smug grin plastered on his face. He was the type who wore his Harvard MBA like a shield, always talking about synergizing workflows and disrupting silos, as if those buzzwords could rewrite the laws of physics, or in this case, the ironclad contract she'd signed 8 years ago. The board members sat around the polished oak table, fiddling with their tablets, half listening, assuming this was just another routine personnel shuffle at Vertex Dynamics, the mid-sized tech firm in Seattle that handled sensitive data analytics for everything from corporate giants to government agencies. Mark's finger hovered over the mouse, dramatic as a villain in a bad thriller. "Your access ends here, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with false authority, like he was delivering a eulogy at his own promotion party.
She didn't respond.
Didn't flinch. Just let the moment stretch. The hum of the air conditioning, the only sound breaking the tension. He clicked. And just like that, her credentials vanished from the system. But what Mark didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the click wasn't an end. It was a trigger. The screens around the room flickered once, then went blank. Not dead, not powered off, but locked in a stark, minimalist display, a single line of white text on black. Core architect contract breached. Integrity mode activated. 11 monitors, synced to the company's central ops dashboard, all echoed the same message. The board stirred, confused murmurs rippling through the room. One exec dropped his coffee mug, the ceramic shattering like the illusion of control they'd all been clinging to. Sarah watched Mark's face drain of color, his smugness evaporating into panic. She turned on her heel and walked out, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, leaving them to stew in the silence she'd engineered. Let's pull back a little, though, because this didn't start with a click. It started 8 years earlier, when Sarah joined Vertex as a fresh-faced systems architect, straight out of MIT with a chip on her shoulder and a knack for building unbreakable digital fortresses. The company was a mess back then, spreadsheets piled on spreadsheets, data silos that leaked like sieves, and no real security beyond basic firewalls. She changed that. Night after night, she wove together a tapestry of code, layered permissions, encrypted audit trails, zero-trust protocols that treated every user like a potential threat. It wasn't flashy, it was foundational. Her work kept the data flowing securely, compliant with federal regs, and invisible to the higher-ups who only cared about quarterly reports. She'd insisted on that contract clause from day one. Section 8C, root-level infrastructure stewardship remains with the originating architect unless formally transferred via 45-day notice, board approval, and documented handover. It wasn't paranoia, it was prudence. Vertex dealt with high-stakes contracts, including one with the Department of Defense for analytics on supply chain vulnerabilities. One wrong move, and you weren't just losing data, you were breaching national security protocols. Sarah built in fail-safes not to spite anyone, but to protect the system from idiots. Fail-safes that monitored 2 key signals, her active employment status and root access integrity. If both were severed without protocol, the system didn't crash. It preserved itself, shifting to integrity mode, a read-only stasis where data was safe but untouchable. Every action logged for forensic review. Enter Victor Lang, the slick new CTO who'd breezed in 6 months ago on a wave of venture capital hype. He brought Mark with him, his right-hand man, both of them obsessed with modernizing everything. They saw Sarah's architecture as archaic, a relic from a pre-cloud era. We're pivoting to agile ecosystems, Victor announced in an all-hands meeting, his voice booming over the Zoom feed. Mark nodded along, tossing out terms like DevOps orchestration as if they were confetti. Sarah sat quietly in the back, her laptop open to the very scripts they were dismissing.
She didn't argue.
Why bother? She'd seen their type before, flashy disruptors who broke more than they built. But the whispers started soon after. Slack messages she wasn't supposed to see. Emails about streamlining roles. Mark began chipping away at her periphery, reassigning junior tasks, excluding her from planning sessions. Then came the HR refresh, a standard update to her NDA. She read it carefully. As always, buried in the fine print, a quiet removal of her architect stewardship acknowledgement. No fanfare.
Just gone.
That night, Sarah pulled her original contract from the safe in her home office. The one with the CEO's signature from back when Vertex was still bootstrapping. Section 8C stared back. Unchanged and enforceable. She didn't confront them. Instead, she monitored. Her private alerts pinged softly. Access tweaks. Permission audits. All logged without interference. Mark's declutter phase was in full swing. A buzzword blitz that ignored the backbone holding it all together. Engineers started complaining. Reports delayed. Dashboards glitching. But Sarah played dumb. Check with Mark's team, she'd say. Her voice steady, masking the slow burn of resentment building inside her. These men, with their egos and shortcuts, were dismantling her life's work, piece by piece, without a clue about the consequences. By mid-December, the tension was palpable. Snow dusted the Seattle streets outside Vertex's glass-walled headquarters. But inside, the air crackled with unspoken conflict. Mark called her into his office one afternoon, the room reeking of his overpriced cologne. We're realigning priorities, he said, not meeting her eyes. Your role's being phased into a consultancy track. It was code for you're out. She nodded, signed nothing, and left. That evening, she activated a subtle diagnostic, a script that scanned for contract alignment every 48 hours. It was her insurance policy, buried deep in the code, waiting. The holidays came and went in a blur of forced cheer and quiet preparation. Sarah spent Christmas alone in her apartment overlooking Puget Sound, reviewing logs, sipping black coffee. She knew the axe was falling. It was just a matter of when. And on that fateful January morning, it did, in the conference room, with Mark's dramatic click. As she walked to the elevator, her phone buzzed, the first alert from her mirror node. Integrity mode engaged. She allowed herself a small, private smile. The system she'd built wasn't vengeful. It was just honest. And now, Vertex would learn what honesty felt like when it bit back. The fallout began almost immediately. Back in the boardroom, chaos erupted in slow motion. Victor slammed his fist on the table, demanding answers. What the hell is this? He barked at the nearest engineer, a young guy named Alex who'd only been there 6 months. Alex tapped furiously at his keyboard, but every command bounced back. Access denied. Integrity lock active. The dashboards critical for client deliverables were frozen. No updates. No exports. Just that damning message pulsing like a heartbeat. Mark tried to play it cool at first. It's a glitch, he muttered, rebooting his machine. But deep down, a knot formed in his gut. This wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. And as the hours ticked by, the knot tightened. Calls poured in from clients. Where's our Q4 analytics? Why can't we pull the feeds? Vertex's stock dipped 3% by close of business. Whispers of technical issues leaking to investors. Sarah, meanwhile, drove home through the rain-slicked streets, the wipers swishing rhythmically, mirroring the calm before the storm she knew was brewing. By evening, The war room at Vertex had transformed into a bunker of desperation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the faces of the assembled team, engineers, legal aides, even a couple of board members who'd canceled their dinners to stare at unresponsive screens. Pizza boxes littered the tables, but no one was eating. The air was thick with the scent of cooling coffee and rising anxiety. Victor paced like a caged lion, his tie loosened, barking orders into his phone. Get me the backups. Roll back to last quarter. But every attempt hit the wall. Integrity mode wouldn't allow it. The system treated their pokes like evidence tampering, logging each one in an unerasable trail. Mark sat in the corner, his earlier swagger gone, replaced by a pallor that made him look 10 years older. He'd been the one to pull the trigger. After all, it has to be her, he whispered to Victor during a brief huddle. Sarah built this thing. Some kind of backdoor. Victor shot him a glare that could melt steel. Then why didn't you vet it before revoking her access? Genius. The accusation hung there, unspoken but felt by everyone. Mark had pushed for the clean sweep, convinced Sarah's legacy code was holding them back from his vision of a sleek, modern Vertex.
Now.
That vision was a nightmare. Down the hall, in a quieter office, the legal team huddled over contracts. Hannah Ruiz, Vertex's sharp-eyed general counsel, scanned Section 8C for the umpteenth time. This isn't just tech, she said, her voice low but firm. It's legal. We breached her contract by not giving notice or board vote. And the system. It's enforcing it. The room fell silent. They'd thought Sarah was just an employee, replaceable.
But she was the architect.
Woven into the fabric of the infrastructure. Her failsafe wasn't malice. It was a safeguard against exactly this kind of hubris. And now, with the DoD contract in play, a $120 million deal for real-time vulnerability assessments, the stakes were existential. Sarah, at home, poured herself a glass of wine and watched the alerts roll in on her personal dashboard, a shadow mirror she'd set up years ago for diagnostics. Each failed override pinged like a distant thunderclap, building the storm. She felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. This wasn't about petty revenge, it was about respect. About not erasing someone's contributions with a click. But as the pings accelerated, the sorrow faded. They'd chosen this path. Let them walk it. The next morning brought no relief. Vertex's offices buzzed with forced normalcy. But underneath, panic simmered. Client services fielded angry calls. Our dashboards are dead. Fix this, or we're pulling the contract. The DoD liaison emailed a polite but pointed inquiry, noting latency in data feeds. Please advise on resolution timeline. Victor forwarded it to the team with a single word. Now. Engineers worked in shifts, trying workarounds, spoofing credentials, bypassing through auxiliary APIs, but the system was smarter. Sarah had designed it to adapt, to recognize anomalies as threats. One attempt even triggered a secondary log, unauthorized integrity breach attempt recorded. Mark called an emergency meeting, his voice cracking as he addressed the room. We need to think outside the box. Maybe hire an external hacker, ethically. Of course. Laughter bubbled up. Nervous and bitter. Hannah shut it down. That's tampering. We're already in forensic mode. Everything's auditable. One wrong move. And we're looking at federal violations. The weight settled heavier. This wasn't a bug, it was a bind. Legal and technical, tied in a knot only Sarah could untie. By afternoon, the board convened virtually. Faces grim on the screen. They debated options. Sue her, one suggested. Hannah shook her head. On what grounds? She followed her contract. We didn't. Another floated re-engagement. Bring her back as a consultant. Victor balked. After firing her? She'd laugh in our faces. But deep down, he knew it was inevitable. The system wasn't budging. And time was money, literally. With the DoD contract's milestones tied to uninterrupted service. Sarah's phone rang that evening, an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. MS. Ellis. This is Victor Lang from Vertex. We'd like to discuss a transitional role. She deleted it. Not out of spite, but because the game wasn't over yet. Let the pressure build. Let them feel the damming up of their ambitions. The slow choke of their own making. She slept soundly that night, the rain pattering against her window like applause. The following days blurred into a frenzy. Vertex's stock slid another 5%. Rumors swirling on tech forums. Heard Vertex's infra is bricked. Bad reorg. Internally. Morale cratered. Engineers quit en masse. Unwilling to clean up the mess. Mark became a ghost. Avoiding eye contact. His declutter initiative now a punchline. Victor spent hours with Hannah, poring over precedents. There's a case from 2022. Similar breach led to a $50 million settlement. The numbers stung. Their DoD deal alone was worth triple that. But suspended. It was worthless. Then came the turning point, a formal notice from the DoD. Due to continuity failure, Contract 87 to 492 is under review. Provide restoration plan within 72 hours. The clock ticked louder. Victor drafted an email to Sarah, open to discussing re-engagement under favorable terms. He hit send, his hand trembling. The damming had reached its peak. The explosion was imminent. The 72-hour deadline loomed like a guillotine over Vertex's headquarters. Victor's office had become ground zero. Papers strewn across the desk. Red-eyed aides shuffling in and out with updates that were all variations of no progress. The integrity mode held firm. A digital fortress Sarah had crafted with precision. Every probe, every clever hack around, was met with the same impassive response. Logged.
Denied.
Preserved. It wasn't just locking them out. It was documenting their desperation. Creating a trail that could bury them in court if things escalated. Hannah Ruiz called in reinforcements, a contract specialist from a DC firm. A grizzled veteran named Tom Keller. He arrived via video call, his face filling the screen like a judge. "You've got a problem," he said bluntly. After reviewing the files. "This isn't tech debt, it's contractual negligence. Section 8C gives her third-party custodial rights post-breach. She's not an ex-employee, she's a rights holder. You can't touch the system without her sign-off, or you're violating your own DoD clauses." The room absorbed the blow.
Mark,
slumped in his chair, finally spoke up. "So, we beg." Tom nodded. "Essentially. And make it worth her while." Victor swallowed his pride and dialed Sarah's number again. This time, she answered. "What do you want?" Her voice was calm, laced with the quiet authority of someone holding all the cards. He stumbled through platitudes. Miscommunication. Value your expertise. Transitional consultancy. She listened, then cut him off. "Send the proposal in writing. Include full recognition of my authorship. No overrides without my consent. And compensation reflecting the disruption."
Click.
The line went dead. Victor stared at the phone, the weight of his miscalculation crashing down. Back at her apartment, Sarah reviewed the incoming email. The terms laid out in desperate detail. Triple salary. 6-month retainer. IP acknowledgements. It was a start, but not enough. She forwarded it to her own lawyer, a friend from MIT days who'd specialized in tech contracts. "Leverage this," she instructed. The response came swift. "We can push for more equity stake. Veto rights on infra changes." Sarah nodded to herself. This wasn't about money, it was about permanence. about ensuring her work couldn't be erased again. Meanwhile, at Vertex, the pressure mounted. The DoD followed up with a sterner email. Failure to resolve may result in termination and penalties. Fines could run into the millions. Not to mention the reputational hit. Board members whispered about ousting Victor and Mark. But that wouldn't fix the lockout. Engineers,
Exhausted.
started murmuring about Sarah. She warned us about the fail-safes. We should have listened. The narrative shifted from legacy problem to arrogant oversight. Tom Keller drafted a settlement framework, emphasizing compliance. We admit no fault publicly, but privately, we restore her role. Victor signed off, the pen heavy in his hand. The proposal went out, all her demands met, plus a non-disparagement clause and a quiet apology buried in the legalese. Sarah read it, felt the tension release slightly. But she held off responding, letting them sweat a bit longer. The explosion came on hour 70. A leaked internal memo hit tech news sites. Vertex in for a crisis tied to botched firing. Stock plummeted 8%. Victor's phone rang off the hook. Investors.
Press.
He called in all hands. We're addressing this. Stay focused. But the damage was done. Mark resigned that night. A terse email citing personal reasons. Vertex was unraveling, thread by thread, just as Sarah had foreseen. She met her lawyer the next day over coffee. Sign it, he advised. You've won. But Sarah paused, reflecting on the years poured into the system, the late nights, the overlooked contributions. This was her legacy, encoded and unbreakable. She added one final clause, annual audits under her oversight. Then,
She signed.
with the ink dry on the agreement, Sarah walked back into Vertex's lobby like a ghost returning to haunt the living. Her new badge read, Infrastructure Custodian, External, a title that carried more weight than any internal role. Victor greeted her stiffly in the conference room, the same one where it all began.
No handshakes.
Just nods. The board watched via video, their faces a mask of reluctant relief. Let's get this resolved, Victor said.
His voice strained.
Sarah plugged in her laptop, her fingers dancing over the keys with familiar ease. The system recognized her signature immediately, the encrypted key she'd held in escrow. Screens flickered to life. Data flows resuming like blood returning to numb limbs. But she didn't just unlock it, she audited. Every log from the breach scrolled by. Mark's revoke click. The failed overrides. The frantic probes. All preserved, she noted aloud. Victor winced. The DoD would see this. Part of the restoration report she'd file as custodian. The relief was short-lived. The DoD's review board demanded a full debrief. Sarah joined the call as the neutral third party, her role now federally acknowledged. The breach stemmed from non-compliant termination, she explained clinically. No emotion betraying the undercurrent of satisfaction. The officials nodded, their questions probing Victor's decisions. Why no notice? One asked. He stammered about oversight. Penalties loomed. But Sarah's restoration mitigated the worst, a $10 million fine instead of contract loss. Internally, Vertex reshuffled. Victor was demoted to advisory. His modernization dream shelved. New hires were briefed on the Ellis Protocol. Review all contracts before changes. Consult the custodian. Sarah worked remotely now. Her influence pervasive but distant. She felt the power shift. A quiet vindication that echoed through every reboot. But the story didn't end in triumph. Doubts crept in. Had she gone too far? The system was safe. But at what human cost? Laid off colleagues. Shattered trust. Yet, as she watched the dashboards hum again, she knew respect wasn't optional.
It was coded in.
Months later, Vertex stabilized, but the scars remained. Sarah's consultancy extended indefinitely. Her name etched into every major update. She mentored from afar. Her voice a steady whisper in strategy calls. The company thrived under cautious leadership. The DoD contract renewed with stricter safeguards, all bearing her imprint. One evening, Victor emailed, "Thank you for the continuity."
No paliki.
But close enough. Sarah replied briefly, "Systems endure when respected." She closed her laptop, stepping out onto her balcony. The city lights below a reminder of fragile empires. What if they'd listened? The question lingered. A moral echo in the rush for progress. Who gets left behind? And who holds the keys when it all locks up?